Hello, I'm Gary Quinn, and welcome to Ready, Set, Live. My guest today is coming to you from Vancouver, Canada. He is the actor Neil Jackson, and Neil is currently starring as AKA Jordan Icicle, the villain on it's a new series which is premiered called Stargirl on the CW. The ratings are off the charts, so you must tune into that. He's also in the season 3 of Absentia, and he has a new film coming out in September, The King's Man, which I'm a big fan of the first one. So, welcome to the show, Neil Jackson.
Hey, thank you, Gary. Thanks for having me on, mate. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, I know you were kind of caught off guard being in Vancouver when the whole COVID hit. So, you never went back to England, right?
No, I live here now. I live in Vancouver. I met a
Oh,
girl here. Yeah, I met a girl here three and a bit years ago, and we did the long distance thing for a while. I was in living in LA at the time, and then January last year, we finally made the decision that I should move up here. So this is home now. So I didn't get caught here.
brilliant.
I live here, which is nice.
That's
Thankfully, I didn't get caught somewhere else.
That's fantastic. No, I love Vancouver. I was there last year for the first time, and I actually walked the city, and I found the Roots store, which I love,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Roots is
that whole
great.
area is so very almost a European vibration. It's fantastic. Well, that's
Yeah.
fantastic news.
Yeah, well,
Um,
It's British Columbia for a reason, right? I mean, they've kind of got some of the best parts of Britain, and then some of the parts of the States, and then they've fused it all together to make their own thing here. So it's a nice mix.
so the good news is that you're on this hit series, once again playing a villain. Didn't you play? Well, you played it on Sleepy Hollow, uh,
Yeah, yeah,
but
I've played quite a few villains now. I mean, it seems like there's something about this face that just screams undead or villainous. I don't know what that is.
well, it's all good. And the character, I did see a few clips, but it seems very it's very intriguing. But it's almost supernatural energy that's the show seems to explode, and I think it's going to be continuing success for that whole.
Yeah, we're blown away by it. I mean, it's one of those that you're off. We were off in Atlanta. We shot it last year. We were off in Atlanta making this show, over there, and you have hopes and expectations that people are going to like it because everybody on that show, and it's not always the case, as you know, Gary, that you can be working on a show and the director may not care as much, maybe phoning in, the producers may be phoning in, some of the actors may be just doing the gig for money and phoning in. But there was something about Stargirl. Everybody on that, from the set deck carpenters to electrics, all the way through to cast and front office, were hugely passionate about it. And it made it so much fun to work on. And the fact that people have now, the response is just incredible. I mean, we ended up with 1.2, I think, was the opening on the CW, which is the highest opening they've had for 7 years on the network. And the numbers held for the second episode, which is the first time that's happened for 7 years. So it's now the biggest show that they've had on there for a long, long while. And the outpouring has just been amazing. We're 90% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes,
I
which is
know.
an incredible rating. I think it's an 88% audience score, and that's been holding for the last 3 weeks. So I'm blown away by the fact that people are responding the way they are.
That's great. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you,
Um,
dude.
and when do you know when you start production again, or we're waiting?
It hasn't been announced yet. The second season hasn't been announced. They were waiting on the reviews and everything. I think, not to jinx us, but it's almost a foregone conclusion now. We're going to get a second
Oh,
season. The ratings being
absolutely.
so good and people responding so well. But then it's a question of this pandemic. What happens now? I mean, Vancouver is opening up in 3 weeks, I heard. So towards the middle of June, production will start back with carpenters getting in, and end of July they're looking to actually start filming. So that's Vancouver, and we're going to be earlier than a lot of other places because we haven't been hit anywhere near as hard by the pandemic. So who knows with Atlanta? If Atlanta, where we shot, ends up opening, then maybe we'll go back there. But there's no word yet.
Okay. What have you found that has been the biggest epiphany for you during this time at home? Has it changed you, or have you found?
It's changed me. I mean, like, I've joked a few times that my experience of COVID so far is not too different to being an out of work actor. You know,
Right.
I'm just golf of time, and I've got to fill it somehow to make the end of the day feel like I've actually been productive. But the thing that I've loved the most is having conversations with my friends and family without an agenda. Normally we'll make a plan that we'll speak to you on Wednesday, and I'm kind of squeezing it in between stuff. And we've got half an hour, 40 minutes to condense our conversation in. And I'm talking to my mum every other day for 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, because there's just no agenda. She hasn't got anything
Correct.
to do apart from her gardening. I don't have anything necessarily to do because I can't go back to work. So it's been gorgeous just having these long, luxurious conversations with my loved ones. That's been a
Wow.
big takeaway of the fact that I'd love to bring that into post-COVID, just slowing things down a little bit and giving time to everyone.
Correct. And the family's still in
In
England
the
in
UK, everyone's in the
Luton,
UK.
right? Luton.
Luton was where I was born, which is 20 miles north of London, and then my family are kind of scattered around. One brother is in Brighton in the south of England. My mum is in North London. Another brother is in north of that. My dad is now lives in France. So people are kind of scattered around a little bit.
Wow. Yeah, I need to get back to England. I used to I used to speak all over England, Somerset and Isle of Man, and
Right.
it's beautiful country. The Coswalls and just
Yeah.
all of that is just brilliant. But I was really amazed at the beautiful scenery and the nature in Vancouver. I
Yeah.
mean, it's brilliant.
It's one of the things I first fell in love with. I came here and shot something 16 years ago here, and arrived, and it's just wherever you look is nature. If you stand right in the middle of downtown Vancouver, 15-minute walk in any direction, you're either at a beach, you're in the middle of Stanley Park, in the middle of nowhere, and wherever you look at these mountain ranges, you feel like you're in the middle of nature, even though you're in the middle of this big metropolis. It's
Yeah,
gorgeous.
I was reading something. I think you posted it or something about, many years ago when there were not so many roles, and you had gone back to England to almost reassess everything, and
Yeah,
you weren't sure if you were going to actually act anymore, and the director, or was it the producer that contacted you and your agent, and you passed on the first round, and
yeah,
then you kept passing on it, and then finally they gave it to you. I mean,
yeah.
what was going on? I mean, I found that to be a real inspirational story of, I mean, what got you through that? I mean, you were basically, I mean, feeling defeated going home. And I know you wait for that sign.
Yeah, it's such a weird industry, this industry, because it's the only industry that I know that you need permission to do the thing that you love. If you're a musician, go make music. If you're a sculptor, go sculpt. In any other art form, you can do the thing that you love without validation from somebody else. But as an actor, you need somebody to employ you on a job. And so the hustle of Los Angeles and the hustle of the industry and constantly looking to try to find avenues to get into that job had started to wear me down. I'd been in LA for maybe 4 years at that point and had little smatterings of stuff. And I'd done some big things. I'd done a Woody Allen film. I'd done the Bond film. I'd done some things. But I was in a period where I hadn't booked a job for 8 months, was struggling financially, and I wasn't telling anybody about it. I wasn't sharing with my family or my girlfriend at the time that I was struggling because I didn't want to voice the failure because the failure made it feel real. And because I didn't voice it, I was internalizing everything. And I had my first panic attack during that time. I remember I was driving and suddenly I got short of breath and I couldn't breathe and I had to pull over and this wave of panic hit me and my body was shaking. It was one of the scariest things I've ever been through, and it passed. Didn't know what it was, drove home, didn't talk about it. And then I started having panic attacks every week and then every 3 or 4 days and then almost every day until eventually I started talking about it with my ex-girlfriend. And it was all born out of this fear that I was failing, that this dream that I'd put in place. I traveled from England, knew nobody in the States to try to make my career happen, and it didn't feel like it was working. I kept hitting these roadblocks, and I knew what I needed to do was go back to Britain and just kind of recharge. So I said to my agents, I'm going to go back for 2 weeks. I'm not going to do any auditions. I just need to reconnect with myself, read some books, sit in nature. And I went back and I stayed at my brother's house in just north of London. He'd gone away on vacation. And I did yoga every day and I watched movies and I kind of got myself back to a place. And then about 5 days in, I got this call that the Make It or Break It, this show, Make It or Break It, wanted me to come in for a 3-episode arc of this new character. And I was like, no, I'm not auditioning right now. This isn't what my headspace needs. So I turned it down. And they called back the next day and they said, the creator of the show really wants you. Can you find a way to get into London, or can you self-tape the audition? This is pre-iPhone. And I said, no, I'm not nowhere near a train station. I'm not going to go into London. I don't have a car. So I turned it down a second time. And then 2 days later, I get a call and they said, they really want you. She has a friend in London who's a casting director who has offered to tape you, and they will reimburse you for your train ticket. So I'm like, well, I'm being rude now if I don't go in for this. So I hopped on the train. I went in. I did the audition. I did an okay audition. My head wasn't 100% in it because I'm still struggling sort of with my emotional health. And the next day I get this call and saying, you booked the job. They need you to start on Monday. This was Thursday. They need you to start on Monday. So can you fly back? And expecting it to be this 3-episode arc. I'm just going to do 3 episodes. And my plan was I'll do 3 episodes. This will be a good kind of welcome back into the industry, and then I'll see how I feel emotionally with it. But I was very wary that my emotional health wasn't 100%. And the show was just like a warm hug. Everybody who did it, Holly Sorensen, who created it, just amazing. And they loved the character so much, they expanded him episode by episode, and I ended up doing 3 full seasons of it. Wow. And I was seriously contemplating when I was back in the UK if being an actor was the path that I should be on, because it was so damaging to my mental health. It was causing me a lot of problems. And I've said it to Holly, the creator of Make It or Break It, that show dug me out of that funk and reminded me that I was on the right path. I was doing the thing that I needed to do.
Yeah, I think what's so important is, and there's so many people who have gone down this path, especially being a creative person, you know, you don't get the validation. And I think the key is not to give up, Neil, ever. And I think sometimes it's really hard because your mental state goes to the bottom and you're looking for what is the sign or the faith or the hope. How am I going to really do this? But I think the emotional health of people is sometimes skewed because you don't want to lose your dream, but you also, people say, oh, well, you have to be realistic. You know, you haven't made it in 5 years. How long are you going to keep trying? But I believe that as a performer, or anybody who's a performer or creative mindset, you must never give up. And I think healing the fear and the stress of the future is really starts within. Yes. And I know that you dug deep somewhere in yourself, even though it was the worst time. But sometimes you have to have darkness before there's lightness.
I completely agree with all of that, Gary. And it's appreciation and perspective, right? I had put myself on this path that my goal at that time was success, whatever success means. And for me, I had this sort of arbitrary barometer of what I felt my level of success was. And when I was falling below that level of success, I felt failing. And the thing with having this sense of success, of arbitrary external level of success, it's always going to change, and therefore it's always unattainable. I mean, when I look back now, and at the time where I was having those panic attacks, I 6 months before had worked on a Bond film. Was 8 months before that, I'd done this amazing film called Push with Chris Evans, Dakota Fanning, in Hong Kong. And immediately before that, I'd just done this Woody Allen film. And so I was succeeding, but I placed this impossible bar for myself and I wasn't getting it. And also the industry, and this is one of the things that I struggle with the industry is based upon comparisons, as you know, and comparison is the death of art, in my opinion. Everything should be made from an authentic place of what you want to give as an artist. And if you are making things from a comparative stance, you're looking sideways as opposed to looking forward. And I would go into auditions and I wouldn't book the audition. We'd get notes back from the casting director and say, we like Neil, but we're looking for somebody who's a little more like this, whoever that actor was. And so I would look at who that actor was and I would go into the next audition trying to be a little more like they were. And of course, in that audition, I didn't book that one because they're looking for somebody who's a little more like this. And slowly over the course of weeks and months, I was being pulled in all these different directions. And losing a sense of who I was, losing a sense of my own authenticity, and losing a sense of what it was that I wanted to do in the first place when I joined this industry as an artist and what I wanted my voice to be. And it took me having those panic attacks and getting the knocks to recalibrate and reevaluate and think, what is my reason for doing this? Because the hustle isn't fun. And so there must be a driving reason that I want to create and the artistry behind that. And I had to reconnect with that. And if I hadn't had that dark period, I don't know if I would have ever reconnected it.
Correct. And I think, having the dark period, I recently, a couple months, probably before the holidays last year, I spoke to Renee Zellweger, and she was saying how she had this long period of going away from the business. She was burnt
Yeah.
out and nothing was like coming to her that she wanted. And she had to go within and start working in this kind of new energy. And I think everybody has to take a leap of faith to sort of
Yeah.
disconnect. And look what happened. I mean, she said a funny thing. She says, "Well, people in the entertainment business, we're just circus people."
Hmm.
And I thought that was so funny. The circus, comes to town, but the entertainment can be a circus.
Yeah.
And I think for you, I think the most important thing is that you've evolved, but I think as your soul has started to understand that the authentic Neil is really what they want.
Yeah.
And
Well,
for anybody.
that's the irony, right? I mean, this industry, like I said, everything is comparisons, and we're looking for the next insert name here. I mean, they do it with films. People will pitch a film, and it's like, this film is Jurassic Park meets Jaws, and everything is comparative based. And the irony is, what everybody's looking for is originality, but you can't sell originality. The people in the front office, the people who are doing the sales and everything else, they can't sell originality. They can only sell what's come before, which is why we see so many sequels and remakes and everything else like that, because it's a built-in audience. And it's exactly the same with actors. They know how to sell, he's the new, but they don't know how to sell this completely different thing that's doing their own thing. But when it arrives, everyone's like, that's the new. Now everybody has to try to be that. And so for me, you said the word fear, and fear was such a big part of it. Fear of failure was the biggest thing that I was having a lot of problems with. I was so scared of failing because there was never a plan B for me. The moment where I made the decision when I was 22 that this was the path that I was going to be on, that I was going to be an actor and a writer and a director, and I was going to work in storytelling. And storytelling has always been a huge part of my life. And it was at 22 that I made the decision that I'm going to become a storyteller, and I'm going to look to do that for my profession. And there was never a plan B. And the idea that my chosen profession wasn't working was almost paralyzing. It filled me with such fear. It was paralyzing. And working my way out of that fear, and I've done a lot of things to work my way out of that fear through starting meditating. While I was going through this dark period, started meditating, and that really helped me kind of calm and balance myself. I've always been very good training wise. So physically, I always did a lot of exercise, which is a good balancer and endorphin changer, and nutrition. But I started doing things like I've done ayahuasca. I've done several courses of ayahuasca, and I've looked to various different modalities. I traveled around India for 5 weeks. I did silent meditation retreats and things. All of these things as a way to try to understand this fear that was circling inside of me, and to first of all understand it, accept it, and fall in love with it, and say thank you, because it's a protector, right? I mean, the fear is trying to protect you, protect me, and I was fearful as a way of protecting my soul and my heart from getting hurt. But actually that fear was the thing that was holding me back. So I needed to say thank you to that fear for protecting me, but I don't need your protection anymore. I'm good. And once I let go of that fear, I started noticing that replacing it with this humility and this love for what I was doing, that started seeping into my work, because of course that residue of fear is going to be in the work. And I started noticing I was going into auditions without the expectation of what the outcome was going to be. Before I was going in, I'm doing this audition to book this job, but I'm booking that job because it's a stepping stone to the next job. And I was looking so far ahead that I was forgetting to be in this moment. And it was an actor that I've worked with before called Wayne Duvall, who's this amazing New York actor. And I've worked on he actually starred in a film that I wrote. And you'd recognize his face if you see him in anything. He gave me this gift and he said, I love auditioning because I get to act today. And that turned a switch in my brain. Instead of auditioning being a stepping stone to doing the job that I wanted to do, the audition became the thing in and of itself. So I would turn up to the audition because I get to act today. That's what I love doing. And I get to turn up, work on a character, present this character to these people. And whether they love it or hate it, that's out of my control. Whether I book the job, that's out of my control. But I get to show my artistic expression of what I internally believe that this character is. And then I get to walk away. And when I turned up and started doing my job in these auditions, I turned up and presented the character in the way that I wanted to present it without this attachment of the way that it was going to turn out. And I walked away. I find that I was getting into my car after the auditions with a big smile on my face because I'd done my job. That was my job. And slowly, as a result of that, I started noticing I was booking jobs, and then I was having recurring jobs with recurring people. And another big sort of signature moment for me was 4 years ago. I'd reached another slump in my career where I wasn't booking work, and the work I was booking was great work, but it was 1 or 2 days on jobs. So I did a Tom Ford movie, which was amazing. Got to work with Amy Adams, which was incredible. But I worked 1 day on that, and I was paid as a 1 day local hire SAG. So I'm taking home $300 from that. So, which is a great daily rate if that's your everyday daily rate. But that was spanned
One
over.
day.
I do a job one of those jobs, 1 day jobs every 3 months. And so I was living on credit cards. I was struggling, and I started driving Uber to make ends meet, which was one of the best things I've ever done, because that again got me over an ego hump. This feeling that, having been in Bond movies and having done all these things, I had this notion, which thankfully I eradicated, that I was better than this. I was past this. Where I was in my life, I shouldn't be driving a taxi anymore.
I
I've
love
moved
that.
past that, surely. And it's now, when those words come out of my mouth, it's such an ugly thing to think, the idea that I'm better than that. And so driving Uber smashed my ego in the most beautiful way. And I would drive, earning my own money, and earning more money than I was making as an actor, which was amazing. I had these beautiful conversations with people. And again, it gave me this perspective, this leveler. And it made me go, all right, it's time to move back to the UK. I've had a great run in Los Angeles. It's been wonderful. I've reached this second slump in my career where I'm not working as much. And it had been 1.5 years when I hadn't worked a great deal. On paper, it looked good because I'd done these 1 day jobs, but I wasn't earning much money. So I said, I'll go back to Britain. This time I'll go back to Britain head held high. I know I've done my work, and I'll look to get in theatre. I'll start working as an actor back in London. And I went back, and I knew I had enough money to get me through 3 months of living in London, before which point I need to book a job, or I need to find another job to supplement my income. And I was looking at houses, rental houses that were in my pay bracket, just outside of central London. Horrible, horrible places. And I was I was on the train going back from viewing one apartment, and kind of feeling sorry for myself that I don't have the money to be able to afford a nice apartment. And there were grotty places I was looking at. And I got a call on my mobile on the train. It was my manager, and she said, "Do you want to be in Westworld?" And I was like, what do you mean? Yeah, of course, I want to be in Westworld. Yeah, it was season 1 was so amazing. And she said, well, we just got a call from Jonah Nolan, the creator of Westworld, and he's offered you a role in season 2. And I burst into tears on the train. Yeah, I couldn't believe that somebody would care that much to actually, first of all, want me to be in their show, but to call and offer it to me without ever needing to audition. And I went and did that job, and that job led to me getting a Robert Zemeckis job and everything else. But I remember I stood on the set of Westworld that first day, and Jonah was there, and his wife Lisa, who were both the creators of the show. And I said to them, I don't think you realize what this means to me. And I said I was struggling, and again contemplating my place in the industry, and whether what I knew I wasn't going to leave the industry at that point, but I wondered what facet I would stay in. Do I start doing theater again? What do I do? And I said, you offering me this job first of all had me in floods of tears, and it was beautiful, but it means so much to me. It's that validation to keep going that I think I needed at that point. And I said, why did you give it to me? And they said, you did an episode. 5 years before that, I did an episode of Person of Interest, which they created. And they were talking about this character, and they were saying, what kind of person do we want for this character? And they said, well, we kind of like this, somebody that has a Neil Jackson energy, you know, the guy that we had in Person of Interest. He had the great energy. And they went, well, let's just offer it to him. So the fact that this little job, one episode that I did 5 years ago, 5 years later, the creator of the show remembered me from that and offered me this prestigious role in this prestigious show, just goes to show that you never know. I never know the roots of connectivity that create a career.
But it's almost, you have to think you were doing something because you were memorable. And when I first met you, 5, 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago,
yeah,
you were memorable energy, and you might have not thought about it, but people don't forget people who have that light. And so
right.
I think what you said about ego, you know, I love the you could write a book called From Bond to Uber.
Yeah.
But I think what you said was so spot on about, you know, when you let go of the ego, you become authentic, and the real Neil or the real person comes through. And that's the light that, you know, that is important, that I think all performers or all people should really start to look within, even during this COVID time, to really look within and say, who am I?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not the job. And really, you weren't the actor. You were Neil. Yes, you studied, you know your craft, but take away the CV or the business card, who are you?
Yeah.
And
It's
your
such a hard
love.
question.
It's love.
Yeah. And it's such a hard question. I mean, it's the fear of failure laced easily the first 10 years of my career, probably the first 14 years of my career. And I'm just starting my 20th year now of doing this professionally. So I'd say the first 14, maybe even 15 years were very much laced by this fear of failure. But within there, closely allied to that was this imposter syndrome of this feeling that, am I good enough? Should I be here? Do I deserve a seat at this table? And my emotional state would oscillate between this fear of failure and this imposter syndrome. And with both of them, the way that my body would react was by, first of all, not talking about it, because talking about it made it real. And second of all, by in some degree posturing to, first of all, make myself feel like I am worthy and I deserve to be there and it's what I'm supposed to be doing, but also to show other people that I deserve a seat at the table. And all of that is a mask to my own authenticity. That's not who I am. And it's really in the last 4 years, I've had the best, knock on wood, the best 4 years of my career, and it's been incredible. And I owe so much of that to the work that happened before that desolated this ego and desolated this need to posture and made me realize that I am worthy, that I do deserve, and that doesn't need to come through physically grabbing and forcing my way through, but actually through surrendering, softening, and just allowing myself to be open. And
Correct.
included in that openness is talking about my own mental health issues. Included in that openness is saying, I'm not okay sometimes. Sometimes I'm struggling, or sometimes I'm hurt, or sometimes this is difficult. And by allowing myself to open up without fear of rebuke or somebody else wounding me, because that's all it was. I mean, as we know, it like this cage, metaphoric cage that we all had built, but I had definitely built around myself, was a wonderful protection mechanism to stop me from being hurt. But when I realized that I'm the only one that can hurt me, I was allowed to get rid of that and actually show that truer self and let it shine through. And it's, if I didn't go through those two really dark periods, the first one, as I said, when I was having the panic attacks, maybe that would be 10 years ago now, 10 years ago, because Make It or Break It was 10 years ago. So 10, 11 years ago. And the other one was about 4 years ago. I needed both of them to kind of course correct me and put me onto this path now that I feel like I can be my open, honest self without fear of rebuke and allow that to come through my art.
What would you say, Neil, if I said someone who doesn't know the definition of love and what you've experienced in the last 4 years, how would you say to someone, this is love, this is what it means? What would be a one sentence that would reflect that?
For me, it's a really hard one, but for me, it's recognizing that we are all the same. It doesn't matter who you are, we are all exactly the same, and having compassion for everybody because everybody is going through something. Um, Before I kind of went through this process, I'd isolated myself. Um, I used to be a fighter, so my sport was boxing, and the way that you approach every boxer I've spoken to, my brother was a professional fighter. I know a lot of fighters, sports people in particular, but fighters in particular have to section themselves off because they have to convince themselves that they're the greatest. You can't step into the ring and think you're going to lose, because if you think you're going to lose, then you will lose. So a lot of fighters set this mentality up where they section themselves off and they isolate themselves from everybody because they're trying to build up this armament that allows them to step into this fight with the feeling that they can win. And I approached my life and the industry with that same thing, that I'm separate from, I'm tough, I'm isolated, and that allows me to have focus and vision. And the thing is, what applied in the ring doesn't apply in life. It didn't apply in life. It caused me to have these breakdowns, have these panic attacks, for my depression to come on incredibly strong, for me to feel very alone and isolated because I had isolated myself. And I didn't let people in, because if I let people in, then they might see behind this armor and see that I'm scared. And I saw fear as weakness. And I didn't want anybody to think that I was weak, because if you think I'm weak, I'm going to lose the fight.
Correct.
And so it was this realization that vulnerability is the greatest strength I think any of us have, because it's the thing that connects us as human beings. We can walk down the street and you can see somebody over in the corner crying. You don't know who they are. You don't know their story, but instantly I'm drawn to them because I feel their pain and it echoes a part of my pain. And suddenly I want to hug them and make them feel better. It's part of being a human and part of the human experience. And how can anybody be drawn into your experience if you're blocking your vulnerability? It's impossible to make anybody connect with you. And so I lived for a period of time with zero connection between people because I had physically and emotionally blocked them from seeing it. And it was realizing I needed to desolate that. So it's a long answer to what you're saying, but suddenly having empathy for everybody and going, we are all going through something. We're all special, but you're not special that you're pedestaled. We're all part of the
Correct.
same thing, and therefore loving everybody because I could finally love myself, I think, is the answer.
Correct. Now, you have the movie that's coming out in September, and we'll probably
Yeah.
talk again, but you're directing your first movie. When is that happening?
That was supposed to start in the fall of this year, and because of COVID, things have pushed. So I've actually got a conversation after this one with the producers of the film to look at what the next steps are to see how we can move forward post-COVID. Um, I'm wildly excited by that. I've directed 2 short films, which I'm incredibly proud of, and they won a ton of awards, which is wonderful validation. But I made them for me, as stories that I wanted to tell, and it's the next logical step in my evolution as an artist. I love acting, I love writing. The greatest sense of creative satisfaction I've got is standing on a set and calling action as a director, because getting to shepherd all of the elements of a story from inception to completion has just been the most beautiful journey. And I can't wait to do that on a feature film.
Wow, brilliant, Neil. Well, I'm so proud of you, mate, and all the good work you continue to do.
Thank
And
you.
I look forward to all your great new projects. And thank you so much for coming
Oh,
today
my pleasure,
via
buddy.
Zoom. And
Anytime,
I hope to see
anytime.
you in person soon.
Yep.
And that will be brilliant. And so thank you again. And thank you for joining us today on Ready, Set, Live. Until next time, stay happy.